So, for everyone who may or may not know, could you state your name and then what your S.C.A. name was as well?
Okay, my name is Patti Cook. When I started in the S.C.A., it was Patty Barrage.
Okay.
And my S.C.A. name is Leonore Aid-an.
Okay.
A-I-D-A-N.
All right.
And, okay.
Well, let's start with a really simple one. Tell me about your very first event.
My very first event?
How did you get introduced to the society?
An old boyfriend.
Okay.
Whose S.C.A. name is Baldric Bulgarian Boulderbane.
That is quite the mouthful.
Master. And his Monday name is Stan Bernheim. And this was down in Tucson, in S.C.A. And he convinced my then husband, who is now Thane Yusuf, Master Yusuf, and he's over in Paid. But he convinced us to go to an event that he and his wife were doing a feast. And we went. And I know that was my first event because it was also Lady Mary Margaret, Mistress Mary Margaret of Derby's daughter's first event when she was 2 weeks old.
Wow. How did...
And I still have the dress I made for that.
That's impressive. How did you get... what was your involvement with the creation of Atenveldt?
I'm not sure exactly. As I said, I was down in Tucson. I went to my first event. We went to the first event, and a while later we went to the investiture of the first Baron and Baroness of S.C.A.
Okay.
And then a while later we started to get active. It wasn't until '76 that Chuck and I decided to get active. We had been very active square dancers. And after a couple of years of dancing an average of 8 times a week.
Wow.
Yeah. It got to be burnout. And so we started doing S.C.A. type stuff. And so I was down in S.C.A. until 80, 79, 80. In there. So I did a lot of stuff down there that was very Iscatherian based.
Okay.
And I was more a matter of being part of Iscather for a long time and Principality of the Sun more than actually Kingdom of Atenveldt. And Barony of Atenveldt was sort of a in name only type thing at that
People
point.
talked about it to the north.
Yeah. Well, Barony of Atenveldt, Baron of Atenveldt was one of the titles of the king for a long time. Because the Atenveldt, the Phoenix area, was the kingdom stuff. So, but in Iscather I did, I think, quite a bit that ended up developing into things for the kingdom. I did a lot of garb making. I was in charge of one of the very first feasts that made S.C.A. history.
Tell me about that.
Well, I wanted to do a feast. I like cooking for people.
That's awesome.
Everybody said, you don't want to do a feast. I said, why? I want to do a feast. They never start on time. There's always there's always this problem, there's always that. I said, not if it's planned and organized correctly. this feast, when I finally convinced people that, yeah, we'd do a feast, started on time to the point where people who showed up on S.C.A. standard time, I understand, almost dropped things when they walked in and people were eating. Because we served when we said we were going to. There was food left over. It made money. The biggest complaint that I heard was that people got sick from overeating.
If you're going to get sick from anything.
Yeah, and that one I figure is their problem, not mine.
Yeah.
So,
portion control is not your concern.
well, we tried to keep portion control down, but whenever I do, and these were served feasts when I did them. And when, after everybody was served, all the food of a particular dish would be put into one container, one dish, and put on a sideboard. And the sideboard was open so that if in the next go-round it was stuff you didn't want, or if you really wanted more of something, you could go get it. So that, you know, and we didn't have to worry so much about specialties because we just made sure there was plenty of variety so everybody
pick and choose.
Yeah, could eat what they wanted to eat, and if they were allergic to something, they'd say is such and such in this, and if so, they didn't eat it. They'd eat something else because we kept it, all pretty well. This was also back in the late 70s. So it was, in fact, not too long ago, I found the literally cut and paste and tape and white out original of the menu we made for one of the feasts, and I need to photocopy that for the Cooks Guild and stuff. But yeah, old time.
Yeah.
So, and I helped with the first newsletter put out down in Atenveldt, in S.C.A. there. And I did arts and sciences, and I was the hospitler. We called them hospitlers instead of gold tea, or chatelaine. Same job, loaner garb, greeting newcomers, making sure people were there. And when I became Principality of the Sun Hospitler, there was not anything really for me to do except supervise the others. And I said, you know what we should do as a principality? Because at that time, most of the S.C.A. was broke college kids. And I knew, I'd been told by people that, well, I made it to the event, and I got enough money, I think I can get home, but
nothing to wear.
Nothing to eat.
Oh.
No, they'd bring their garb and stuff. That was fun. And they'd bring their armor and everything. So I said, we really need to set up a kitchen of some sort. So I set up the Principality kitchen at major events.
Like a soup kitchen style
It
thing.
was a soup kitchen style, real basic stuff. Coffee, hot water for tea or cocoa, and either soup, chili, spaghetti, something that was cheap and...
Make lots of it.
Yeah, 5-gallon pot, and it was donations. And at one Bro Creek War, somebody came up, you're making coffee? If I bring coffee to you, a pound of coffee, can I just get coffee? Sure, that's fine. Or people would do dishes, or help set up, or help tear down, or whatever. But it made sure people got fed when they were there. And every time the kitchen was set up at an inter-kingdom event, or an inter-principality event, it made money. Didn't so much in local principality events, but it's fit a need.
Clearly, there's a niche and you guys built it. The funny thing is you actually knocked out probably 5 questions I had. But we're gonna troll through them anyway, just because you never know when it sparks another memory. Now, I assume by this time that the award of arms was a known award.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me when you got yours.
I got mine at the coroneting of Dennis and Trudy as Prince and Princess of the Sun. It was when Ton and Elizabeth were king and queen. And at that point, because the kingdom was so large, the prince and princess had the ability to award arms. It was given by, under the king, but by the, or whatever. But it was...
In power of the king, we present this to you.
Yes. And, in fact, it was the first order of business after they got their coronets.
That's awesome. So, my first two interviewers had the privilege of, when I asked this next question, like, I can't ask what your first Crown tournament was because you were there at all of them. But what was your first Crown tournament?
The first Crown tournament I was at was the one when Deaton and Keir were king and queen and Jonathan Whitewolf won.
Okay. Now, you mentioned like the Cook's Guild or the niche that you filled with the Principality of the Sun. Was that in reference, and then you also talked about the feast that you wanted to hold. Tell me about an event you autocrated, maybe not necessarily, and if you didn't have one that you autocrated, like was there a facet that you were in control of and helped show how it could be better?
Most of the time when I helped autocrat, I was doing the feast. That was my thing. I grew up cooking, and there are some classics that some of the people that were around in the 70s, 80s will remember. I was in charge. I also did a lot of clothing, of garb, and it was almost funny because the crown that Amiat won, at that event, I was on one side of the field, Richard was on the other side of the field, talking to different people, and we got together and I said, I'm doing Amiat and Carenza's coronation outfits, and he said, oh, you're also doing their feast. Amiat wants egg rolls and wontons. Because I had managed, I have a tendency that if people tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it.
Screw you, I'm doing it anyway.
Mm-hmm. I made fresh-baked yeast bread, actually not fresh-baked, steamed buns.
Fair enough.
At Kitty Box.
Wow.
In the dust and the sun. I made the dough there and everything, and people were going, you can't do that. You did that. Okay. But it was, so that event, I did their robes, their garb, which was gorgeous. I'm still pleased with that. If you look at Amiat and Carenza's coronation photos, you can see. Ask Bartholomew Carey about that, and he'll tell you what he felt about that event. The feast was a full Chinese feast.
Wow.
We started with winter melon soup, and fortunately I had somebody that could do it who carved the melon. So it was served from the melon shell.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was at the old Mormon church that's now the Arts Council building on Latham.
Okay.
Where we had practiced. We had fighter practice there and everything. This was my kitchen. The guy who was doing the maintenance was working on the stove. He promised me it'd be ready at noon. It wasn't ready until 2. It was interesting trying to get everything done. Good thing I had walks, electric walks, and electric stuff. But we got it done. Served it on top. The last course, because one of the secrets to doing a feast is you start with stuff you can do ahead of time and get ready. That's filling and relatively inexpensive, and you save the most expensive stuff for the end. Because by that time they've eaten and are not going to eat as much of it. So we actually had a shrimp dish that's called, in most of the cookbooks, Princess Shrimp. We renamed it Royal Shrimp.
Nice.
That is a Szechuan dish. So it starts with heating oil in the wok and dropping in those little bitty dried peppers. Now, as soon as you drop those dried peppers into oil, hot oil,
they're special.
It releases capsaicin into the air. Smells wonderful.
My wife was cooking a dish that talked about using habaneros that had the capsaicin in them, and it didn't occur until she mentions it to Hold for Friends later that you're supposed to do that outside.
I had 4 woks going.
Yeah.
With double recipes in them, and I doubled.
Oh.
Find out you don't need to double the peppers when you do that. I drove everybody out of the kitchen. And I understand it made quite a stir out in the hall when people come pouring out of the kitchen with their eyes running and coughing and hacking and... But then you take the peppers out. So I was still in the kitchen taking peppers out of the oil and finished the dish.
Brave soul.
It was wonderful. There wasn't any of that left over. So, but that was a wonderful feast. I spent most of the time in the kitchen. Spent most of my time in the kitchen at a lot of events. Which is one reason I am an advocate of wireless microphones and speakers all over, including in the kitchen for court.
Yeah. So, what was your first officer position?
Hospitaller.
And that was for Iskathir, right?
That was for Iskathir.
Okay.
And then, while I was hospitaller, I also ended up being Reeve.
Now, for those of the people watching...
Reeve is, what are they calling it now? Exchequer.
Okay.
Money, treasurer. We had an emergency, needed somebody, and it got, here, you. And somehow, in there for about a month and a half, I also ended up, at the same time I'm baronial Reeve and hospitaller, I ended up being principality Reeve and hospitaller.
Wow.
So I held 4 offices all at the same time.
Well, they weren't your spare time.
My spare time. But it was just a real short period of time, but it was something that would never happen now. But back then, I will tell you this, I have never held a warrant. Because we didn't have warrants.
Not in that day.
No. I was also sort of deputy arts and sciences.
Nice. At the beginning of the interview, you mentioned about being at Iskathir's investiture. Mm-hmm. And I assume it's its premier or incipient investiture, because it was becoming a barony at the time.
Right.
Can you tell me about that some more?
Not much, because I really didn't know what was going on.
It's a fair assessment. Was there a baronial investiture that you attended after that, then, that meant something special to you?
I mean, there have been several baronial investitures where the people meant something, but not really, because I think in large part until fairly recently, they were not that big a thing for everybody. I mean, they were a big thing, but they were not...
The pomp and circumstance wasn't quite the thing that it is now?
Well, no, but there was pomp and circumstance at every event. it was, none really stand out except the one where the Baroness-to-be was in tears because she got told she couldn't wear her gown by somebody who didn't know what they were talking about.
Ooh.
It had
There's a
roses
story?
on it.
Oh, is this the story that we were talking about someone out there?
Could be.
They were talking about one person wearing roses. Someone came up to them and tried to just dress them down about it. And they weren't a member of the Lady of the Roses. And so I know that they mentioned that another person should have put another event deliberately in. A garland of roses around the head, a rose dress, and...
Well, and I got told by the same token that when I was doing my arms, designing my arms, they said, well, you can't do roses, and you can't do this, and you can't, and unicorns and dragons, and, there were things that were overdone, and they said, rose, you can't do, I said, why can't I do a rose? Because you're not a Lady of the Rose. But according to corpora and stuff, the symbol for the Lady of the Rose is a single heraldic rose gold pendant. I said, I don't want a heraldic rose. I want a garden rose. Well, they won't. My first application passed with a rose.
Tell me your heraldry.
Current or first?
The one that created the stir about the rose. Is that the first one?
Well, the first time, was a rose. And it was also something that now would never get passed.
Oh, I definitely want to hear about that. Then we'll go to the current one.
Because it was really simple. It became a badge when I changed it's azure, a yellow garden rose, issuant from an iron cooking pot, all proper.
I think did they make that an award at some point? What did it become a badge to? The Cooking Guild? Oh, just you just made it your own badge then.
It's my own badge. And I just passed the same thing, Field was passed as a second badge.
Nice.
But because it was blue with black and yellow on it.
Because there was color on color, that would never have passed now. Because
yes.
The pan was black, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The pot's black.
When I spoke with Duke Heinrich, he had his heraldry, and it was the black rondel on the green field, and he said that was the item that wouldn't pass now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I later, when I learned a little more about heraldry and stuff, realized that my potted rose didn't really look like a device. It looks like a badge. So I came up with quarterly, vert, and argent.
And for those watching,
that's green and white,
perfect.
Divided in 4. On a shamrock counterchanged, which means you draw a shamrock on it, and where the shamrock is on green, it's white, and vice versa.
Okay.
A garden rosor.
Nice. That's pretty.
Mm-hmm. It is pretty, and it's very heraldic looking.
Distinct, too.
Yes. And so I have 3 different pieces of heraldry that have been passed that have yellow garden roses on them, or
roses of some kind.
Garden rose, or which is a golden
rose.
Garden rose. Now, roses are roses. They don't distinguish between heraldic and garden.
Another reason it wouldn't pass now. So, now, tell me about the first coronation of a king of Atenveldt that you attended.
That was Jonathan Waples.
Okay.
Again, I don't remember a whole lot about it.
Was it one of your first events that you went to?
It was. It was very early in my history. It was.
If the investiture of S.C.A was the first, then how soon after that was this investiture? Or sorry, coronation. Excuse me.
Well, no, there was an event before the investiture.
Okay, so the event one is that one, and then investiture is number two.
Two. I'd have to double check on years in there.
Do you think it's the fifth or fourth?
It was probably the second or third kingdom event.
Okay.
Outside of Iscadurian events.
And so you saw Jonathan White Wolf ascend the throne?
Yes.
After that point, at some point I guess would say the bloom is off the rose, so to speak, when it comes to understanding some of the things about the S.C.A.
Mm-hmm.
What was a coronation that meant something? Whether it was the people that were getting crowned or something special happened at it, what would probably be your most memorable coronation?
You know, in some ways, there isn't any one.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because there are memorable things that happen at many of them.
Okay.
Like I said, on the Atenveldt, I did so much for. It was also one of the first times that they did at coronation, they allowed populace to swear fealty, and it's the only time I've sworn fealty. When Deepman Care had their second coronation, it was a field coronation, and it was special for reasons there. When Ton and Elizabeth were crowned, it was in Las Cruces, which was one of the first out of
Arizona
events. Plus, it was Ton had been second in so many crown tourneys that it was, a
finally felt like his time had come.
Yeah. And of course, there was presenting him with the group that presented him with the baby palm tree.
Did they now?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well,
how'd that come about?
There is an old story. Down in Iscadurian, for a long time, fighter practice was held on the university campus in an area between two buildings where it was grassy and there were some palm trees.
Okay.
And evidently, I did not see this one, but at one point, Ton was demonstrating a blow of some sort on the palm tree and hit it just right, and it rebounded and knocked him out. Or knocked him flat or something. But he got killed by a palm tree. So when he finally was crowned, somebody presented him with a baby palm tree.
Peace offering.
Of some sort. Yeah. But, and there were silly things and lots of things happening at different events, at different crowns, and it was just...
I heard someone's dog got knighted, or made a master at arm.
Given an award once.
Clearly there's something to that story.
That was, I believe that was at Jonathan White Wolf's, and it was Nauseous, who was Ivan de Grey and Day's dog.
And so now it is Lord Nauseous?
I think so. I didn't know Nauseous very well. It was not a happy-making time. He also gave awards of arms to his son and daughter, who were very small, which was questioned by many people. There have been a number of things like that happen that...
But at that time, were people still not kind of making it up as they went along?
Oh, yes. I think we still are sometimes.
Was there a favorite demo, like at a school or a library, that is meaningful to you in some way? whether people or the event specifically or something that happened at the event?
I love doing demos. I used to do demos every chance I'd get. There were things that happened, usually not with the demo, but either before or after. Like the demo that I was going to get picked up from a class to go to. So I went to class in garb and curtsied to my instructor.
I'm sure that was memorable for him.
And called in my lord. It was just automatic. You put the clothes on it, or the demo that, back then, one of the things that many of us did, just as part of it, was wearing a belt knife of some sort. I have one that was made for me, and it's essentially a kitchen knife, a regular kitchen knife, a single edge, and a shape that I had it on for a demo, and the person I was riding with needed to make a stop on the way. So he stopped, we both went in because it was Tucson, it was hot. I didn't want to wait in the car.
Right.
We got the strange looks because we were in garb. And then I realized that I probably shouldn't have taken the knife into the credit union.
I could see how that would be inappropriate.
I mean, didn't have any problems because I didn't even think about it because it was there. There was the time I did something like 14 demos in 3 weeks.
Whoa!
Several of them on my own. We had a glut at one point. I did demo coordination for a while up here for 8 mil.
Good grief.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have a problem. I can stop any time.
When I do, as Richard says, I tend to overdo.
Wow, we really have shot through almost everything.
And, well, the other thing with demos is going to schools with kids.
Tell me about that.
And relating history to them. And doing things like, how old are you? Okay, in the Middle Ages, at your age, this is what you would have been doing.
That's cool.
And it's sort of like, they go, oh. And when you've got 12-year-olds and stuff, and say, at your age, you would have been betrothed. What do you mean? You'd be essentially married. Oh.
Yeah, 'cause you weren't going to live that long.
No.
Sorry, Sparky.
So, it's something that they all, and getting them to understand some things about history and relating it to them and putting them there, and getting the teachers who say, you got so-and-so involved who sits in the back and stares out the window and doesn't talk. And that, those are the feel-goods.
Nice. Tell me what it was like to meet Richard at the S.C.A.
Okay, I'm not sure what he told you. In those days, I had a reputation.
Be.
Well, let me put it this way. The first coat hardy that I made for myself, I put it on, and Chuck, my husband at the time...
This is a German type dress, right?
Well, this is the Gothic fitted dress, the very simple, very full, fitted through the midriff, and his comment was, the neckline needs to be about 2 inches lower. Well, I couldn't quite lower it 2 inches. As it was, the darts, which have another whole thing, but the darts ended up about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the neckline. And this was the style, I mean, his attitude was, you got it, flaunt it. And I was much smaller, sort of, than I am now. And necklines were so that was, I was this redhead with cleavage. And I was also a dancer, a belly dancer, because I wanted to do Middle Eastern style clothing. And if I'm going to do Middle Eastern style clothing, I better know something about the dance and the culture.
I understand there was a story about some car keys I went to see.
Yes. They were actually Bartholomew's car keys, it turns out. He was riding with Bartholomew doing it down in Nisket here. And somehow or another, I ended up with the car keys and dropped them in my cleavage. I've heard stories of Rick seeing me at events. But that was the first time we actually met.
You did mention that he had asked many people about who you were, and then of course it got back to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it was, but yeah, I that white cohorty that I made, that was, I could do things in that I understand made and lost a lot of people money. I could put a tent up in it without falling out.
Well then. I can see the betting going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
But there are stories. There are, yeah. The S.C.A.'s been a lot of fun. It's been, I took a break for a while for a number of reasons and couldn't stay away. I had to come back.
When I asked Rick about a favorite award, he left me with, surprised me by leaving me with for the most part, an epitaph to the interview that was kind of meaningful and deep. Did you have a favorite award, or is there anything, because this would be the last question I have, that you want to leave everyone else who's going to see this?
You mean that I've received, or that is given? Or?
That you've received, or that you gave, because you mentioned that at the time a lot of the awards you didn't receive, you gave them. Was there something about that process that was special to you, or something?
Okay. I've never given awards because I've never been on the front.
Okay.
Okay. One of the most... There are several that are, I mean... And I think because I received them so early on in the history, they're in some ways very meaningful. For one thing, there weren't nearly as many awards back when I got most of mine. There are 2 or 3 that are probably most important to me from the early days.
Tell me about those.
One was when my lamp of Tirascathir. The lamp of Tirascathir has never been a freely given award. The early ones were done, and the medallions were actually numbered and given in order. I hold, I believe, number 9. And that was after one of the feasts. I was given that. Another would be when I received my Light of Atenveldt. It was at a grand outlandish, so it was quite a long time ago, from Theo.
Okay.
Of my friend, who is no longer with us. And I joke sometimes it's because at that event, I'm allergic to coffee. I can't drink coffee.
Right.
When I cook, when I have a kitchen, when I have a stove, the first thing on the morning is coffee. And it's there for anybody that wants it, that needs it. One morning at Outlandish, there was a duel at dawn that Theo, as king, was asked to be witness at. So Theo is standing there in the cold, wrapped in a blanket like this. And I walked over with a cup of coffee, and this hand comes out and goes. And I joked that I got my light for providing coffee at dark 30 in the morning.
That's great.
I did that type of thing for anybody. You know, it's just one of those things that you do. The one that that one really, really, really surprised me. That was just an amazing thing. And I still have that light. And I think every once in a while about passing it on when a light is given, but I can't. And it's one of the old copper etched lights. The other one was the total surprise when I was given the Queen's Grace by Carenza at the end of her life.
Did she say anything to you?
Basically, gotcha! Because it was one of those things that I just had no idea. I just do what I do.
That's awesome. I want to thank you for taking your time to sit in here and interview with me. And this will be uploaded to the Legacy Project for YouTube that Raven's doing. And people will get... The biggest thing we're running into is that we're realizing that most organizations either fail long before they reach 50 years, or they may start to become an institution. And we have an ability today that we didn't back when, for lack of a better term, like Washington was president, or beforehand, so we don't have to worry about him writing a memoir. We can record it for everyone, and it's not just words that can be conveyed through, but your look and face and the meaning. And because when you smile, it clearly comes through on camera. So I want to thank you for helping us convey this to the future generations of the S.C.A.
I'm glad to help. Love talking about the old days. Love talking about the new days, too. But the legacy, it is a big part of it.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.